everyone, and welcome back to my podcast. If you're new here, my name is Barb, and you are listening to Spirits, Witches, and Demons. Today, we are enchanted by a special guest who walks the line that most people wouldn't dare. Christian Kenny is the creator of Killer Cards Tarot, a system that uses astrology, numerology, and tarot to map human identity, and in some cases, connect it to some of the darkest figures in history. But his work doesn't stop there. Through a platform called Aurora, he's begun to explore how these same symbolic systems might be used to help map suspects in real-world investigations. Christian, welcome to the show.
Thank you very
It's
much.
so
Glad to
good
be
to
here.
have you here. Sorry, I'm going to mute my phone. It's going to start going off. It always does this. And that's something that my audience is very familiar with. If my phone is at all on, it goes off because I live in a haunted house and they tend to take over sometimes.
No way, you live in an actual haunted house?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Yeah.
That's pretty
So I
crazy.
don't know if you're familiar with the area I live in, but I'm on the East Coast as well.
Hmm.
So I'm in Nova Scotia, but I'm on an island called Cape Breton. Okay. So
That's
it's
really cool.
it's about straight up from New York.
That's pretty cool.
And this area is a small population. The whole island has about 140,000 people, and the island is the smallest province in Canada is Prince Edward Island, and it's very small. Cape Breton Island is east of Prince Edward Island, and it's double its landmass size. It's about 10,000 square kilometers, which is probably about 6,000 miles
Wow, okay.
in size. So it's fairly small, isolated East Coast place. Um, we are just getting some huge notoriety. There's a new movie out. If you have a chance to see it, I strongly recommend. I'm biased, of course, but it's called Little Lorraine, and it's about some cocaine smuggling that happened here in Cape Breton in the 80s.
That's pretty cool. Is that on
Yeah.
Netflix? I gotta watch that
I
tonight.
don't know exactly if they're going to stream it. I know Crave was part of it. So it's currently part of the Toronto International Film Festival, and it's being seen in all the theaters, a lot of theaters across Canada right now, and every show is
Okay.
selling out. So I just went to see it yesterday, and I mean, like I said, I'm biased. I'm from here, so um, it's a really good movie, though. The acting was really good. Sean Astin was in it. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He
No,
was in Lord of the
I'm
Rings,
not
played
familiar.
Frodo's best friend.
Oh, oh, okay, okay, yeah. Well, of course I know Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, everybody does, right? When I say that as reference, they're like, "Oh, okay, okay." Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I'm better with faces than I am with names.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, he was in it. There was a few fairly well-known names. Not that I would know everybody, but he's one I grew up with. And of course, I was a Lord of the Rings fan. So um okay, so let's really start to get into it. Before we dive into the darker edges of your work, I want to start at the beginning. So, what really first pulled you into astrology, tarot, numerology, not just as interests, but maybe as systems that you felt you could actually explain as something real?
So I got into it as a skeptic, really. I've always been interested in this stuff since a very young age. And I've always been very critical, logical, analytical thinking, even as a young man. And I've kind of always had this thing where I like to prove myself wrong. So like I have beliefs and I have things that I think are true or whatever it is, and I always like to prove myself wrong, not as like a negative thing, but just so that like I'm always accepting new information no matter who's giving it. I don't want to be biased in things that I do or things that I say. I just always want to have like the best information available. So I got into it as a skeptic, and over years and years and years of doing it, it's just one thing after another, basically confirming or proving it right or proving a use case or synchronicities or magical things that happen that truthfully, like you really just can't deny, everybody has those moments where it's like, oh wow, like the eureka moment where it's like, I can't explain that. That's pretty crazy. But that's pretty much how I got into it. I got into it as a skeptic and now I'm a full believer.
That's awesome. I have to say, I'm kind of I'm kind of on the same wave with that, although I started as a believer, as a very young person seeing things, and then I became a skeptic because I didn't
Hmm.
believe what I was seeing and experiencing. And then I went into the I needed to debunk everything, and if I couldn't debunk it, then it was paranormal. If it wasn't normal, it was paranormal, you know.
I
And
like
so
that.
I absolutely understand what you're saying. Now, was there a moment there? Because you kind of touched on it, but was there a specific moment that you stopped being curious and you started thinking that there was definitely a pattern with what you were seeing?
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot of moments like that, and they all like kind of like overlap and compound each other. So I guess I've told a lot of stories on podcasts. I would like to tell one that I haven't told yet. When I was very young, I've always been an artist, right? Since I could pick up a pencil, a crayon, anything, I've always loved to draw, any kind of artistic expression I love. And when I was very, very young, I had this really big, huge, like the big style sketchbooks, like almost like the size of the one, the board behind me. And I would draw in it every day. And I would draw a lot of weird things, probably things that like a younger kid wouldn't normally draw. However, my mother went through my sketchbook one time. She went through a couple of my sketchbooks because I believe she was in school at the time, and she had to write like some kind of paper, and she was writing it on like me being an artist and a young kid and whatnot. And she noticed some things that were a little weird. One of which is I drew the Twin Towers being blown up. And the date that I drew it was almost a year before it actually happened. And when she actually reviewed this, this was a year after it happened. And then like a couple of pages after were like a bunch of bombs going off in the desert and stuff like that. So that's something that's definitely stuck with me for a while because I was kind of there's like a paranormal or a psychic ability to like I guess foresee the future or foresee fortune. I was actually like drawing it, I guess, in a way. And I still have that sketchbook in storage because I think it's really cool. But that was definitely one instance very early on that stuck with me for a while. And I was really young at the time, but like, and like when you grow up from a young adult into adulthood, you kind of forget about a lot of those things. And it's something that has always come up again and again throughout my adulthood.
Cool. Um, that's a pretty significant moment. Absolutely. Um, I couldn't imagine my connection. I don't even know what to call it half the time, but my mediumship, my connection, I am definitely, I think there's many different variations to people's abilities. Like what you're talking about is definitely having a seer ability and being able to draw it out and not knowing that that's what you're doing, but being
Mhm.
able to put it pen or pencil to paper and having these visions come out on the page. And for me, I totally love that in other people and wish I had it in myself. I'm jealous because I absolutely have no seer ability. I don't know what's coming in the future. I've never been able to know that. My connection is I'm connected to spirit. So I can actually know when the energy shifts in a room and see spirit, hear spirit, and and it goes for everything positive and negative. So I can see the good things and the bad things. And so when that happens, sometimes spirit will tell me something that's going to happen in the future to somebody, but I wish I trusted that in myself because I'm just the medium. I am literally a conduit giving information from one realm to another. So I really don't see myself as like special in any way as being able to know things. So I get jealous when I meet people like you that have that ability. That's really cool. So how the drawing aspect that brings me into your tarot deck, the Killer Cards Tarot. I took a look at your website. I kind of did the little what your birth date reveals about you as far as the card or
The
whatever.
calculator?
I,
Yeah,
I really didn't understand it. I'll be honest. I didn't understand.
sure.
So I'm hoping you can walk me through. So it's not a traditional deck by definition, it's an oracle deck. Um, and it's provocative, it's uncomfortable for I'm sure most people. I see the dark stuff, so this actually is right up my alley as far as the aesthetic I love. Um, but it's intentionally done that way. What exactly were you trying to maybe disrupt or challenge when you created it?
Sure. So it actually is a traditional tarot deck. It's a 78 card deck with all the majors, all the minors, and all the correct suits.
Okay.
So something that's really important to me is that, especially nowadays, where there are so many oracle decks and there are so many tarot decks that are coming out. Not that I have a problem with the way it's being done. I just I can't like if I see a deck and the system is not there. I consider that a novelty deck, right? So if it doesn't have the correct symbology, the correct positioning, the correct colors, and so on and so forth, that is considered to me a novelty deck, and that's totally cool. I have hundreds and hundreds of tarot decks, and I collect novelty decks. But what I wanted to do was I wanted to create something that is factual in the actual ancient system of tarot, astrology, and numerology because tarot, astrology, and numerology are all the same thing. You could read astrology through tarot. You could read tarot through astrology. You could read numerology through tarot and astrology, and so on and so forth. It's all the same thing. It's just used in different ways. I would say that tarot is probably the easiest of the three to do a reading because you have the card, you have the pictures, and you could use memorization for that. Although I don't like to use memorization for readings, but you can. Um, when it came to this specific project, um, it wasn't it wasn't my first project, and it wasn't something that I set out to do. It was kind of happened by accident. So my first project, which I've been working on for roughly over 4 or 5 years now, and it's still nowhere near to be done, is another tarot deck. Hopefully, in the next 3 to 4 years, it could be done. It's just costing a lot of money. I mean, as of right now, we're probably at $100,000 in costs for producing this deck,
Wow.
and we're not even halfway through. So ultimately, what we're trying to do with that secret project is basically take the a Rider Waite deck, which has been quote unquote argued as the best deck, period. It's the original, and it's 100 years old, which is to me, it's like, okay, hey, we're in the 2000s now. People have tried, but like, why don't we have a deck like that for us, people who are like living in this time? Um, so with that project taking so much time, I wanted to, in the meantime, with my free time, because that project has a lot of periods of time where there's nothing that we could do. It's kind of just a waiting game. So I wanted to create something else. And I noticed that like a lot of people around me and like, family, friends, everybody really likes true crime. Me in particular, I'm not a really big fan of true crime. I know that like the number one podcasts in the world are true crime podcasts that sell out like football stadiums and people watch it live, which is crazy to me, because like I'm not too interested in that kind of a thing. The same thing with like TV shows and like Netflix shows and movies. Like you have like Zac Efron starring in serial killer docu series slash movies, and it ranks number one. And so I seen that there was this like huge interest in true crime and the uncomfortable, the morbid, and I wanted to kind of touch on that in a way that nobody's done before. So what I ended up setting out to do was I had my assistant pull 200 over a little bit over 200 different cases and true crime files and serial killers for like the last, 50 to 100 years and, rank them like, from like the most notable to the least notable. And then so she produced this with their names and their birth information. And what I asked her to do before she gave it to me was just get rid of their names because when I did these calculations, I didn't want to have the bias of like a name that I might have recognized when I made the calculation. I wanted it to be completely blind for my own sake and just for the authenticity of the actual work. Because again, I'm a skeptic, right? So when we started doing all these calculations, um, we would find their card. I would input their card on the list, and when the whole list was done, I'd send it back. She'd send it back to me with the names already on it, and then I would go and look the name, the birthday, and then the card that we picked, and that's when like things started to like pop out like a bunch of eureka moments. So like a couple of eureka moments really fast. We did the Unabomber ended up being on the list, and he was the tower card, which is the only card of a blowing up building, which is crazy, right? Because I didn't pick that. That's his birthday calculates to the tower card, and he killed people by blowing up buildings. That's pretty crazy. Same thing with
Yeah.
Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy ended up being the magician, and if you know anything about Ted Bundy and how he treated his case when he got caught, he was basically pretending to be the magician, being his own lawyer, trying to perform magic and illusion to people to try and win that case that he had no business even thinking he could win. And also another thing we found with Ted Bundy was if you Google him and you have all these court pictures, he's always in the magician position. So the magician position is like one hand up, one hand down, and he's in that position like in a lot of photos, which was pretty crazy. Another thing was Charles Manson as the emperor, and he, in all of his interviews, he always says, "I'm the emperor, I'm the king, man. I control this," because he was the cult leader. Another one was the son of Sam as the chariot. He literally got caught. Son of Sam only got caught because he was using his real car with his real license plates that were attached to his real address. If he wasn't doing that, he probably wouldn't have gotten caught. And it's ironic that the chariot is a vehicle and he got caught because of his vehicle. Another one that was probably the most crazy was Jeffrey Dahmer as the lovers. Now, you're familiar with the lovers card. There's two figures in the front, one figure in the back. Jeffrey Dahmer, when we did a Freedom of Information Act, we pulled all of his court records because we did extensive research into each person. We didn't just take everything for face value. And we pulled his journal from the court records. And in his journal, he had these plans to create an altar for some kind. I don't know what he was really using the altar for, maybe some like magic or something. But it was the drawing was the exact depiction of the lover's card. Maybe not exact, but pretty damn close. He had these two figures in the front, a table in the back, and then this figure behind the two figures. And his plans were to like use real bodies and like put them there as like the lover's card. And that was going to be his quote unquote altar, which is weird. And it's the lover's card. So this kept happening like again and again with all these calculations. So like there's that eureka moment. It's like, oh, okay, wow, like we didn't pick these cards. They just happened to be them. And there's like these crazy coincidences with the cards. And with all of that data that we ended up calculating, and again, this whole process from start to finish took 2 years, probably a little bit more than 2 years in total. Like this wasn't something that just happened overnight. Between the calculations, the illustrations, the printing, everything, it took about 2 years. It took a very, very long time. Um, with the actual data that we found, I noticed that there was some weird clustering in statistics and weird clustering, especially in the minors. So when you're talking about a birth card, your birth card could only be a major card, right? But then the lesser known soul card is a minor card, right? And it's two different calculations. It's the same calculation, but it's extended to make the birth calculation, and it's reversed to do the soul card, and that's what that calculator is on my website. So your birth card is kind of like your birth cards assigned at birth. This is your process through life. These are the things that you need to learn, work on, and if you know them, you could expand in life faster. Your soul card is who you are as a person. So, for example, my soul card is Two of Cups, and I love that because Two of Cups, when it's upright or at its best, or the soul of a Two of Cups is at its best, they see everybody eye to eye. They want to make friends. They want to collaborate. Everybody is an equal. On the flip side, um, when it's not at their best, perhaps you as a person, maybe you're overloaded at work, you're having a bad time, you're having any kind of issues in your life that could take a toll on your mind and your soul and your body and your spirit, you might flip to that negative side. Or I don't really like to use the word negative, but you understand what I'm trying to say. And that is thinking you're better than everybody, or thinking that you're entitled to something, or thinking that you deserve this and you don't deserve this. And that's the flip side of that. So that's also really cool too, because even me, I have my bad moments, and I could think back to that like, oh, I'm acting on like the reverse side of my soul card. And that realization kind of helps you bring it back to like, hey, these things are just external things. You don't have to act this way. You don't have to feel this way. Go on, so forth. And with all of these data points, like I said, we noticed a lot of different clusterings. Like, for example, there were a lot of swords, a lot of swords, and there weren't that many cups. So then we started looking into the people who were swords and the people who were cups, and we noticed that the cases of cups were people who necessarily killed almost killed in certain manners, like for example for love. Like a lot of people in cups killed a spouse out of love, or killed somebody who harmed their spouse out of love, or these types of scenarios. And then the people with swords kind of just killed because for the F of it, almost. So we took all of that information. We created an analytical statistic calculator so that you could take all that information plus a ton of other criminal cases of murderers and stuff that we were able to find, but not all of it. And basically, you could put your birth information in there, and it gives you a statistical percentage chance of even having the capability, right? So now just because you have the capability based on, your sun sign, your moon sign, your astrology chart, your numerology, just because you have a high capability of being capable of doing such a thing doesn't mean you actually do it, because you have to think about all the circumstances in life that kind of add into that. Did you have a good childhood? Did you have good parenting? Did you have a traumatic event in your life that could trigger that? Or maybe right now, are you having a really rough time? Are you late on your mortgage? There's things involved in that have to get added into it too. So all this calculator actually does, it doesn't say that you're a criminal, it doesn't say that you're a murderer. It basically states like this is the probability statistic chance, because there's archetypes in life. Everybody's a different archetype, and there's certain archetypes that are period not even capable of murder, even if somebody was in front of them and going to murder them right now and they had a gun in their hand, they wouldn't be able to pull the trigger just because archetypically that's who they are, and they're just not capable of doing it. And then there's people who would do it. And then there's people who would only do it if that murderer was going to murder a loved one, and then they would do it. But they wouldn't save themselves, but they would save a loved one. There's different archetypes, and it's built into our astrology. And when we made the app, we tested it with private investigators and detectives, because when a murder happens, there's a time constraint. The clock starts ticking from the second it happens. You have 48 hours. Everybody knows you have 48 hours. That's like the thing, right? Because after 48 hours, usually cases go cold. So when a detective has his investigation in front of him, he's weighing interviews, he's weighing evidence, and he has to make a decision on who he's going to focus his time on. And sometimes they make the wrong decision, or they make a decision that maybe wasn't particularly the best decision. And then that's when cases go cold, because they wasted their first 48 hours on the wrong person. So what the application actually does is they could input all of the suspect's birth information, and it gives them a percentage of chance. And then if the person who that they were looking at he had a hunch on that person, and they're like a 60% capability, he knows that, hey, maybe that's somebody that I should really focus on. But the app itself only has an 89% accuracy rate, and that's because we don't have total access to the criminal database. And even if we did have access to the entire criminal database, there's things that could mess that data up. Like there's definitely plenty of people who've been convicted of murder who possibly didn't commit that murder, right? Because things happen. And that data could possibly skew this data. So at 89%, I think that's great. Problem is that our court system doesn't take stuff like this seriously. So I know I just spoke for a lot, and that's a lot. So I mean, if you have any questions, go ahead.
I do, because we kind of jumped from the Killer Cards Tarot and your process on that into Aurora, and I think the audience might have just got a little confused for a second there.
Sure.
So I want to just bring it back just before we jump straight into Aurora, because I really am absolutely fascinated with what you're doing there, and I want to know all about it. Um, I do want to know, uh, as far as the calculation you were talking about, the birth
Mhm.
date, the soul day, um, is there any time that calculation, instead of it being like, um, is it all methodical and calculation, or is, like you were talking about, putting scenarios in place, like what kind of childhood and this and that, right? So is there a time when the calculation ends and intuition absolutely has to take over, or is it all just like, let's be analytical? Is there any time intuition takes over, or is it all analytical thinking?
No, it would, so that the app itself is not going to do the intuition for you. The person making the investigation is going to have to do the intuition. But like as far as us making the calculations for the cards, That was all the calculator. We didn't have like we didn't, again, going back to like decks nowadays where somebody just says, "Hey, this is cool. Let's make this the magician." Like it doesn't really work that way, right? Um,
Mhm.
you got to have all the proper symbology behind it, right? It has to be a working. It doesn't have to be a working deck, but that's I don't want to create a novelty. I want to create something that's actually useful. Um, and
And I think
so
that's where
so
I was going with the oracle word, is it's not necessarily like the, hold on. Of course, my tarot's all messed up right now. Um, I usually have it to the side of me, my Rider Waite, but I went on a ghost hunt on the mainland of Nova Scotia a few weeks ago and took all my cards with me. Um, so the Rider Waite Tarot, what I was going to get at though, is when you look at the traditional Rider Waite Tarot, every single item on the card means something. What you were talking about, the
Mhm,
symbology, right? So the number on the card, numerology, the actual symbology of the card, and how it works together to actually deliver the message of the card. Now, for me, when I'm reading, um, I use two different tarot decks typically when I'm reading, and then a few oracle decks. When
mhm,
I'm reading for somebody as a medium, I'm speaking to spirits. So I've been asked many times, why do you use tarot and oracles if you're a medium and you could speak to the spirit? It's this is my grounding technique. Like I use oracles and tarots to kind of um, bring the message to a level I can understand because of this numerology, because of the symbology and all that stuff, right? So that makes a lot of sense to me. And then I use my intuition to interpret what I'm seeing and interpret what I'm hearing from spirit. So I just wanted to touch on that. So I get the calculations for the cards, and when we move into the app, the Aurora, as far as intuition, how the investigator will have to use something of their own in order to use that calculation to form a part of their decision process, right? So in that, uh, did you combine for astrology the Western and the Vedic astrology along with the numerology?
Yeah, so everything gets consideration, right? Western, I like personally, I like Vedic, but I also like Western for other things, right? But the Western and the Vedic, there's not too many differences
Mm-hmm.
structurally. The Vedic just adds more context and more information, and there is a little time difference when it comes to Western to Vedic. For example, like Western may say that we are in a retrograde, but the Vedic says that the retrograde is not till this date, and vice versa, and that can happen. But the actual structure is both what it's in there, and they're all, and again, it all correlates to the card, right? You have the magician. The magician has to have certain things on that table. The table has to be positioned in a certain way. The magician has to be in a certain position. Um, so all of those things calculate also to astrological signs, and that's usually very useful when somebody says like, "Hey, when am I going to get married?" You know what I'm saying? And then you could pull a card and then see the astrological time frame of what that card represents to give them a roughly accurate representation of when. Maybe not an exact year and day, but hey, during Taurus season, likely. What year? I don't know, but during Taurus season, that's when you might get married.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. I agree with everything you're saying. Like, it makes sense in my brain. I hope the audience, I hope you guys are doing your research as well and maybe diving into this a little bit. I will link all your website in the show notes so everybody can go and test their own birth chart or calculation and see where they fall. I did mine, and like I said, I did it when I was first contacted to kind of like, who are you? What am I getting into here? And I just briefly looked because my audience knows, but you might not know. I work full time. I run two companies and I host this podcast. So busy doesn't even begin to say what I am. So I only looked at it briefly, and I can't remember what my calculation actually turned out. But when I do the numerology side of things, just in my little notebook and do my birth date numerology, it always comes up to the Hermit. Because I'm a 9. That's my birth number, right?
Mhm.
Um, so and that has made sense to me quite a bit throughout my life. I'm not necessarily hermit in my house, but I'm an extroverted introvert. I absolutely love to go out, but I need my home time to rebuild myself, right? I need to rebuild. And I haven't looked at what killer cards might say about that and who's on the number nine, who's the hermit. But yeah, it would be interesting for me. I need to dive into that more because this is very interesting. So I do want to move straight into Aurora now because you did touch
Sure.
on it. Um, this is where you kind of are taking a little bit of a different turn because instead of tarot cards, which anybody can use and anybody can interpret in their own way, this is a system that, from your assistant, and you had just spoken on this a few moments ago, 89% accuracy and being tested currently. So, can you talk me through like what exactly does that mean? Like in real world investigations, like what kind of role is Aurora playing currently?
Sure. So right now, I want to clarify, it's on ice because we did our testing, but the problem that
Okay.
we're having is that if this was to be used in a courtroom, the opposing party who may be defending a murderer would use this to throw the case. They'd be like, "Oh, well, you used astrology to try and figure out who you should investigate, and that's nonsense, and this whole case is a sham." That's the problem we're having, right? Now, it doesn't really, in my mind, I'm like, it doesn't really matter because like evidence is evidence, right? All this did was give the detective an idea of who he should focus on based on his own hunches, right? So if you have a list of 10 people, and let's just say the detective really has a hunch or an intuition that the guy Steve is the murderer, and then he uses this calculator, and Steve came up as like a 60% probability, he knows like, hey, my hunch, that's like a confirmation for his hunch, and then he could go on that person. If that person turns out to come up dry or empty, he could go to the next person and say, okay, this person was a 50%, let me try this person, and so on and so forth. It's just
Okay.
helping them with the time. It's not proving that somebody's a criminal. It's not proving that they did the crime. It's just helping with the time of figuring out who actually committed said crime.
Okay. And I have like just a thought, an interjection that I don't know, it's probably something that's already come up in what you're doing, but haven't uh, investigators used psychics in the past and gone to court with the psychic finding?
This
So
is my
isn't
same
this on the
argument.
same
This is my
level?
yes, this is my same argument that I'm having.
Okay.
I do not have an answer for you because I mean, there's plenty of problems with our court system. That's a whole nother podcast in
They're in
itself.
Canada
You
too.
know?
Yeah.
Exactly. So I don't understand, and like this is not something that like I'm trying to charge the government for. Like it's free. It's open source. I just created it and I said, hey, like this could be really useful for helping people. Like use it. You know what I'm saying? And again, it's on ice because if I wanted to push something like this to be used, I would have to spend a ton of money to try and convince and possibly lobby, pay politicians to use it. So it's free source right now. There's really not much that I can do with it. I have an attorney who reaches out every now and again to see if there's anybody who'd be willing to test it out. But it's completely free and open source. Like the same thing with the tarot deck. Like the tarot deck, most of the profits of the tarot deck goes to charity. Like it's not, we're not doing it to try and make money. We're doing it just for the sake of research, enlightenment, and studying.
Okay. Well, here's an idea, and I'm just going to throw it out there. You probably, again, have already thought of this because this is your baby, right? But my audience reaches over 200 countries. Okay, last year's numbers came in and I was just blown away. I'm from a small little island. I didn't think I'd reach that many people. But um, there might be law enforcement or a court system in another country that could use this system and maybe get it off the ground so that when it gets established in another country and has some backing, then the US will say, okay, now we see the numbers, we see the data, we see the historical information being done by, say, Germany or Switzerland or Italy or whatever, and now we're willing to take the chance on it in this jurisdiction, in this state, in that whatever. So that might be an avenue for you as well, as to maybe get it launched in another country, in another type of law system.
That's how I know you're clairvoyant because that's exactly what the attorney's doing. That's exactly what he's doing. He's trying to get other places outside of the United States to use it. Like we're literally just like giving it to people. Like, hey, this could be useful. Try it out, and
Have you
we
tried
will
Canada?
see what happens.
Because we've used, are you familiar with the Mr. Big program?
No, I've never heard of that.
Okay, so the Royal Canadian Mounted Police here in Canada, they've been, it's controversial, highly controversial, but they've used the Mr. Big sting operation many times, and they've been successful and they've been not successful. So, what it is if they think that Steve committed this murder, but they can't prove it, then they'll put the Mr. Big sting operation in process, where they'll put an undercover cop in as Steve's new friend, get him on board, get chummy, start with low level crime like drug dealing or whatever, and then he has to meet the big boss. So when he meets the big boss is like, well, I need to know everything that you've ever done so I can make sure that I can protect you. And that's when Steve comes out and says, I murdered Helen, right? And it's all being recorded. Every interaction has been recorded, everything, including that confession to the Mr. Big, right? The big boss. And then that
That is
gets
insane.
him convicted and sent to prison. So again, highly controversial because it's entrapment,
Yeah.
right? On the baseline, it's entrapment,
Mhm.
but it's worked a number of times to actually get very bad criminals off the road. But that being said, I know the RCMP are kind of, they're okay with using some unconventional methods of getting their guy. So it
Yeah.
might be an avenue as well.
There's also like, there's the idea, I'm I think like crazy. So um I've also understood the fact that like, hey, something like this can be used uh inappropriately, right? Like anything could be used the wrong, tarot could be used the wrong way, right? A Bible
Mm-hmm.
can be used the wrong way, right? You give a con artist
Usually
a
has
Bible,
been.
or exactly, you give a con artist a tarot deck, it could be used the wrong way. But and like the a lot of the conversations that I've had with myself and other people, it's like, okay, well, what if the government uses this to like pre-profile people and use this information to like say like, hey, we can't give you a loan or we can't give you food stamps because you have a 60% chance of committing a crime. And obviously that's also a conversation, but I think that like especially today's day and age, something like this could already be created. There could be a big company like Plantier or something already using something like this and we just don't know about it. And if it hasn't been thought of and created yet, which I have, maybe somebody will piggyback off of what I already made and create it let down the line. So that's another reason why I just want to make it open source and free because it's like, hey, I created this. Somebody else might create it. Somebody else maybe have already created it, but these were my intentions. This is why I made it. I wanted to help. If it helps, great. If not, what are you gonna do?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And the more people that know that this kind of thing exists too, is it's great to get the word out there, because I had never heard of it until your assistant contacted me, and I was like, I don't know what this is. Actually, to be quite transparent, when I was first contacted, because I'm located, physically located in such a small area of Canada, and not knowing, like, I don't get a lot of feedback, like people emailing or messaging or whatever. I just literally put out the content I want to talk about, and if somebody listens, great. If people don't listen, no skin off my back. I'm doing something creative. I have a creative outlet, and that's why I do it. Um, but when your assistant contacted me, I was like, can you prove to me you're real? Because with AI these days, I don't know if
Uh,
somebody's contacting me and it's a scam, right? Like, so many people get scammed easily these days, right? So I was like, okay, so show me this, show me that. Like, I had maybe 3 or 4 back and forth emails where I was like, I need to know that this person is real. Like, if you want me to talk to this person, I need to know that they're a physical human being, right? And so they did a good job. We're here. Um, but I do have a few other questions that I really want to
Sure.
get into. Okay. Do you see? And I think you've touched on this actually. I think we've really touched on this, but I want to ask the actual question and see where it goes for you. Do you see Aurora as uncovering truth or generating perspectives that might otherwise not exist?
Both, because I consider astrology truth, right? And also, literally, that's what astrology does, right? It opens up perspectives that people normally don't have, especially for somebody who's a skeptic or has never used it before. They start to use it, and it's opening up perspectives and thought processes and ideas that may have never been there otherwise. So I definitely think both.
Yeah, I love that. I love that because when I was thinking about it, I was like, okay, is it one or is it the other? Is it both? And I was kind of thinking both as well. Um, okay, let's see. I have a few more, and a lot of it you already touched on. That's why I'm going through them. Um,
Sure.
okay, what kind of responsibility would you feel like personally? How would you feel if people were engaging in your systems, whether it's Aurora or doing the calculation for Killer Cards Tarot, um, using these systems, using these tools, what kind of responsibility do you personally feel, or if any?
hmm Uh, None. I'm not responsible for somebody else's actions. Nothing that I'm doing here is anything that's new, right? These systems are ancient. They're very old. They've been used since the dawn of man. I mean, even our government uses astrology. Some of the richest people in the world uses astrology, tarot, and numerology. I mean, famous saying that I say all the time on every podcast is millionaires don't use astrology, billionaires do. And it's true because they know like certain times of the week, certain times of the month might be a good time to buy stock, or certain times of the of astrological transit might be a good time to start a war, right? They know these things and they use them for, and it's been proven that they've used them because we could track back years and years and years and years of data. I used to have clients that would call me and be like, "Hey, I'm trying to sell this stock and this guy's not answering." And I'd be like, okay, call him on Friday at 6 o'clock at the top of the Venus hour at the end of the month, and then see what he has. Like, oh, I can't call him. It's we close at 5. I'm like, trust me, you call him at 6 o'clock at the top of the Venus hour on Friday at the last day of the month, it'll work. And 9 times out of 10, not every time, but 9 times out of 10, it did work. And they did make a sale. So it's like these systems are already there, right? The Bible, the tarot, everything's available. Who you are as a person is how you are going to use these things. And if you're going to use them for bad reasons, that's got nothing to do with me. I mean, I take responsibility for everything that's happening in the world, but not in the sense that I feel responsible if somebody does something wrong with these tools.
Excellent. And I was thinking that was probably going to be the answer. So assigning archetypes, like especially violent ones, I'm speaking specifically with the Killer Cards Tarot, to real people. Um, do you think there's a risk in reinforcing narratives instead of uncovering truths about people?
Well, what do you mean by narratives?
Like, for example, Ted Bundy or
hmm
Charles Manson, their kind of persona that they put out has
hmm
been glorified in some way, whether
hmm
it's in movies or with people wanting to be their friend, wanting to follow them in some way, right? So they've gained some notoriety as far as that kind of thing, that fame, that infamous nature. So that kind of narrative, like reinforcing that kind of, I want to be famous too. I want people to look at me like that too. Do you think that that kind of thing might play on people? I think maybe this question came up when I'm thinking neurodiversity, mental health, any of those kind of scenarios. Like I'm neurodivergent myself. So
hmm
I often think of that. Like if I'm told I am kind of like this person in an archetype, right? do I take on that narrative and that persona? Do I kind of like relate to that because of that? Or do I uncover a truth about myself? That's kind of where I'm going with that.
Sure, that's basically shadow work, which everybody should do, right? So if you're in especially in that particular scenario, that's shadow work, and that's something that you should explore because that's only going to advance you as a person and make you better, right? Do I think that this is necessarily glorifying serial killers? Definitely not, because this is not entertainment. This is a tool, right? So it's one thing to make a movie about Jeffrey Dahmer and make a bunch of millions of dollars off of it, and people now quote unquote glorifying it, but also at the same time, there's certain people who watch those types of movies as entertainment, curiosity, introspection, um, trying to understand. And there's people who watch it because they truly are interested in that kind of thing. They're interested in horror. They're interested in the taboo. And whether you create something or not, these people are still going to exist, and you can't control that. That's just who these people are as a person, as an archetype. They are interested in these things. And that is interesting to say because, again, the most popular podcast and movies and TV shows in the world right now to date is true crime, is horror, is serial killers. And that's something that's very interesting to me. And I haven't fully thought all of the different scenarios out regarding that because that makes me very curious because I want to know why. Why are people so interested? And I have a couple of answers for that, but I'm not confident in those answers. They haven't answered all of the questions I have about that. So, specifically, killer cards, we're definitely not glorifying anybody. Tarot is a tool, it's an introspective tool. So it creates a thought process, right? And tarot itself doesn't carry dark or negative energy. The energy comes from you. Or if you're talking to spirit, it comes from spirit, right? The tarot is just there as a tool to kind of filter out what spirit's saying and then give a confirmation or a way of saying it in more detail to the person that you're giving the reading for, right? So ultimately, yeah, I would say no, right? No, it's not a movie. It's not entertainment.
Yeah. No, and I completely agree with that. I completely agree with the shadow work aspect and the using that word specifically shadow work because a lot of people don't even think of that nor do they talk about it. Doing their own shadow work and what does shadow work mean because I think that was a coined phrase that some mediums or some people in the industry have thrown out at people maybe more than they should have in cases where it becomes one of those words that people actually don't think of anymore. You know what I mean? They don't consider it as a real term for healing oneself. But shadow
Mhm.
work is definitely, I've talked to many people I've done readings for and said, have you done any introspection? Have you done your shadow work? Where you actually ask yourself the tough questions. Is it in my nature? Am I being nurtured in this way or is it in my nature? Like where's the line drawn? What exactly um what exactly is it in me that is making me feel this way? Whatever that way is, right? And for me, my biggest shadow work is to understand obviously a redhead. I have a redheaded temper, right? So I had to understand what triggers that. And for me, it's being tired, right?
Mm,
So I was
same.
outside, I was in my yard, in my garden. We're finally getting spring here. I think it snowed yesterday, but we're finally getting spring. So I was prepping the garden and I was getting tired. So I start dropping my tools because I'm tired, right? And that's when I start getting frustrated. And that part of me comes out. Now, I can see me being definitely compared to maybe on a archetype level to whatever serial killers on card nine, right? Because when I get mad, when that rage hits, it hits. And there's almost nothing I can do to control it. What I've learned through my shadow work is I can control it. Is
Mhm.
I need to understand what triggers me and where can I stop. And that was doing literally journal work and meditation and saying, okay, it's when I hit this level that I have to say, no, I'm done. I'm done today and walk away. And it took me probably, oh, I'm going to say 49 years to understand that. And I'm 50. So it took me a long time, right? Um, and it's only like in the last year I have to say, like, yeah, it took a lot of shadow work. I have a, hold on 1 second. Okay, I'm back. Um, so I have this deck. It's from Timu. It's as cheap as you want to make it, but I don't know if you can see it there. It's
I
just
could see
like
it. Yeah.
hands or whatever, but it's shadow work. Like it's just words on it. So I'll shuffle it every now and then and get a word to work on. They're literally like depression, regret, deceit, ego. Ego was my biggest thing. That's what was triggering my anxiety and anger. So I worked on ego. Like, when did my ego take over? And I was like, I'm upset. I'm not upset with anybody. I'm out here alone. I'm upset with myself, and understanding that. So I um I really love that, looking at the where was I going? See, this is the ADHD. I'm not on my script.
I
And
have
my
ADHD,
audience
trust
gets
me.
this. They know that. Yeah, enforcing reinforcing narratives. I understand what you were saying. Like, you're not risking that. That's within that person, right?
Mhm.
Whether they reinforce that narrative or not. And I do see this as uncovering more truth than anything, um, which can be very uncomfortable. And a lot of people don't like to uncover their own truths because it
Yeah.
is uncomfortable. Um, okay, so I'm out. This is a different question because I'm not sure. I'm not exactly sure how this is going to pertain, but what do you say to people who believe systems like this risk creating meaning where none exists? So it kind of plays on the previous question.
Mhm. I would say, well, if you're skeptical about anything, right, they
Yeah.
try it, try and prove it wrong, right? I think I think a lot of people get stuck in like what I would call the devil card, right?
Mm,
The devil card is two people in front of a devil-like figure, and they have chains. If you look closely, the chains are loose. They could take the chains off, and a lot of people chain their mind up to believe in one thing, and if they believe in that one thing, no matter what evidence they see going forward, they have this thing in their head that's just like, no, block it out. I have to believe what I believe in. I don't want to be wrong because it's that ego or whatever it is of
ego.
being wrong.
Yes.
And
Mm-hmm.
being wrong is such a great thing, and
Yep.
it's such a great feeling, I should say, also, um, because you get to kind of like really see how the mind works, right? And even touching back on like what you were saying, like some people, like if they were using this deck in particular, they might pull a card and be like, "Oh, does that mean that I'm like this guy?" Like, no. If you understand tarot, you understand tools. It's an archetype. It's not a physical person. We may have put physical people on the card because that's what people are interested in, and this is a shadow version of that. But that's not who you are, right? You're not this person. There's a really famous story. I don't know if you're a rock and roll fan from the 90s, but I really like Nirvana. And there's a really great story of Kurt Cobain when he put out the Nevermind album. I believe it was the Nevermind album. It's the album with the baby in the pool. I don't know if you remember what
Yeah.
I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so when he
Yep.
put that out, all of the studio execs and his PR people and his manager, they had called him into a meeting. They were like, "You can't put this out. This album cover has to go." And he was like, "Why?" He was like, "There's a naked baby on it, and that's pedophilia." And he's like, "What do you mean that's pedophilia? It's just a naked baby. If you're viewing it as pedophilia, then that's a problem with you, right? Because that shouldn't be how you're viewing this, but you're viewing it that way. So that's your problem." And they went back and forth, back and forth. Eventually, he got what he wanted, and he was able to produce the album. However, I think the studio execs were smart, and they took a sticker and they put it over the area where the baby was naked.
Yeah.
But when you took the cover off, that was there. So it's like if you're feeling this type of way and you think something is a certain way, you need to ask yourself, why are you thinking that way? where is the train of thought? Are you following the thought process of what leads to what and why you think this way and where that goes and where that thought goes and where that thought goes and so on and so forth? And a lot of people don't do that. And especially like before you said the word shadow work, right? It's like the thing with words is that words are magic, right? We use all the elements to produce a word. We use symbols, which are letters, to make the word, right? So we're creating spells. You spell a word. We're saying spells. We're creating magic when we say words. And certain words have certain spells and they do certain things to your head. So somebody who already has a preconceived notion on what shadow work is, they hear that word and then brrr, the register clings in. This is what this means. This is what this means. This is my thing. And that may
Yep.
not be correct, right? That may not be correct. Or, if,
Hmm.
or at least if it's not correct, maybe you should understand why you think the way you think because of hearing that word. The same thing with the word spirituality, which is a crazy hot topic because like nowadays, people are like so into spirituality as as almost like as if it's like a cool watch or a cool piece of clothing or a
Hmm.
jewelry. They're not they're doing it for face value and for clout and for whatever you want to call it without understanding anything. And usually these are the people that are the most outspoken and the most hypocritical. They're the first people on my Instagram to say this is disgusting, this is morbid, why would you do this and the third. And it's like, well, do you understand that it's a tool? Do you understand how power works? Do you understand any of this? And the answer is usually no, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's really important that if we're going and if you are going to use a word and we are going to say these things that we understand and we do the thought process behind it of the why, the when, the who, the where.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. Actually, I could not agree with that more because not only as a person who hosts a podcast on spirits, witches, and demons, I am a pagan witch. So I sell witchcraft stuff. And my logo is a pentagram, right? And where I live is very Christian. Is very, the Catholic society here is huge. I'm a recovering Catholic myself, but I go at like artisan markets and I sell my products, and I can't tell you how many times face to face I've been told I'm a worshiper.
Hmm.
Everything I'm doing is wrong. I sell spells, like you were
Hmm.
talking. Like I actually sell like candle spells and spell jars and all this stuff, and people often talk very negatively about it. But then I explain to them what it is, right? That I'm pagan and everything I use is from the earth. It's all things you find out in nature, right? I just put it in a jar. What the fuck is
Hmm.
wrong with that? You know,
I
what
I
the
love
hell?
I love talking to those people in particular. I'm not a very religious person, and I wouldn't label myself a spiritual person because I don't like any of those words. I don't belong to one specific group of belief.
No,
I'm very open and everywhere, right? But when I do have those types of people who engage with me, usually if it's of the Christian category. I like to have a conversation with them as long as they're willing to be open and respectful, right? Because some people they're just not
absolutely.
respectful, right? And you know, they say, well, in the Bible it says this. I said, well, what Bible are you reading? And they say, oh, I'm reading the King James Bible. And I said, okay, that's good. That's a pretty good book. Did you know that King James, when he wrote that book, he burned all of the other Bibles in his kingdom? And if you were caught with the Bible of the previous written version, you would be quote unquote killed or burned at the stake. And did you also know that before he wrote the new Bible, he wrote a book on demonology, on how to talk to demons? Most people have no idea. King James's first publication was a book on how to talk to demons, conjure demons, use demons, demons' names. And they hear this, and whether or not, well, it is a fact, but whether or not they knew it or not, they immediately go into denial mode. They shut me down and they just
Mhm.
want to run away and walk away. And they may totally block that out of their mind and never think about it ever again. Or they may go home and say, oh, wow, this is right. Maybe I should try and find a different Bible. Maybe I should go to the Old Testament. And I prefer the Old Testament over the New Testament if we're talking about Bibles, right? Um, but again, it all boils down to the archetype, the person. Are they going to be respectful? Are they going to digest information? Are they going to take it into consideration? No matter who you are or what you tell me, I'm going to treat you with respect, and I'm going to take what you have to say, whether I agree with it or not, into consideration.
100%. I agree with you, especially the neither religious, neither spiritual. Because when I consider myself pagan, pagan is an umbrella term. It's not
Hmm.
a religion. And many people are confused by that, right? Like I'm
Hmm.
pagan because I'm Celtic.
Hmm.
I, I'm I'm
People hear pagan and they're
95%
like
Irish.
Norse mythology.
Yes, exactly. Like it's exactly it. So because we spoke for a number of moments about criticism and
Mhm.
like kind of addressing that, how has criticism kind of shaped your work and or strengthened your belief in your own work?
Sure. Well, I definitely get criticized a lot for this type of creation, right? I get criticized because it's a tarot deck, and I get criticized because it uses true crime serial killers. And it's really no sweat off my back because I can put myself in the other person's shoes, and I could have compassion, and I understand, and I get it. You don't understand, and you're basing what you're saying off of preconceived notions, and maybe you're not willing to talk, but I also understand that, and that's totally okay with me. I can't control that. That's totally external to me. And I personally, when I create something, I don't like to create something that's already been done before. I like to be original. There's too many people copying everything these days, right? And I want to be original. I want to do something that's thought-provoking. I'm an artist at heart. Art is supposed to make you feel uncomfortable. Art is supposed to make you feel things, right? Art can make you feel comfortable, uncomfortable. It can make you feel love. It can make you feel this. This is why we go to museums. This is why we look at paintings. This is what an artist does. This is my job, right? Quote unquote, my job. And I like to create things that are conversation worthy, thought provoking, and different and new.
It's awesome. I love that. And you know what? I think if most of us acted that way and thought that way, the world would be a better place, honestly.
Definitely.
Um, there there's a lot going on, and so I'm going to actually ask a final question to
Sure.
see exactly, you know, I kind of want the audience to chime in here and comment. Maybe send me an email if maybe they have questions for you that I could forward on
Mhm.
to your assistant. So if someone engages with your work, whether it's Killer Cards, Aurora, anything you've built, what do you hope they walk away understanding? Not about killers, but about themselves.
Maybe not walk away understanding, right? I would like them to walk away with a more open mind, right? Like
Okay.
I said earlier in the podcast, right? I like to prove myself wrong. And I think that if nothing else, develop the ability to challenge your own ideas because that can be applied to everything, right? Not just understanding tarot, astrology, true crime, or the psychology behind these types of things, but just plain and simple, that could be applied to everything. That could be applied to your daily life, your love life, your family life, your friend life. It could be applied to politics. It could be applied to anything. And I think that's probably the single most powerful tool a human can carry.
That's that's pretty good actually. I like that. And I think that's the perfect way to go out, you know.
Great.
So I'm just going to wrap it up here, guys. This has been one of the most intriguing conversations I've had in a while. I'll be quite fair. Besides sitting with a medium, which was really cool too. Uh, that this sits right at the edge of belief, psychology, something harder to define. So whether you see Christians' work as a symbolic system, a psychological lens, or something entirely different, it asks a question we can't ignore. So, how much of what we see is already inside of us? So, I'm going to leave it here until next week, guys. Take care.